Sunday morning cold, eyes on the score, touchdown dance ball, craving for more. Friends are calling, trades are on fire. Rookies falling, championship desire. Fantasy football fever, chasing the dream. Top of the leaderboard, we're the winning team.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Healers program. Football is over, but this is where Dynasty begins. I'm your host, Dustin Brown, and today is going to be a solo pod. I am going to be going to the NFL Combine later this week. On Friday, it will be the tight ends that we'll be looking at. And then on Saturday, we're going to have the quarterbacks, wide receivers, and running backs. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about the process of what I like to look for when I'm looking at my prospects going into the rookie season. But first, you can find me at FF Healers, and you can find Colton at FF Captain 22 on Twitter X. And don't forget to find us on YouTube, which this is going to be the time to check it out. Check YouTube. If this is the first time checking us out, please look for at FF Healers. It'll be much easier to look at the document that I'm going to be sharing with us today. So this is going to be more visually advanced than some of our normal pods, but I'll try and break it down for you listeners out there as well. Before we break down some of my analysis documentation, I'd like to go over just a little bit of news. Tyreek Hill underwent wrist surgery. What is this going to entail for the Dolphins? Is Tyreek going to be healthy enough to play for this season? Will he go into retirement a little bit earlier, or will he be moved potentially from Miami to another team? It sounded like he was pretty unhappy with what was going on, especially once Tua got injured. We'll look as the season gets going here in 2025. Also, the Packers have requested the NFL to ban the tush push, which is really ironic because they tried to run it with Tucker Kraft multiple times during the season. We'll see what the NFL decides. With the tush push, there hasn't been really any reported injuries. So, in my opinion, I think it's going to be hard for the NFL to look at banning it. Once there's a quarterback or a player that gets severely injured from this play, then I could see them being speculatively taken away. The problem with the tush push is the running backs or a tight end is generally pushing the quarterback forward. They're trying to get it so that way that play doesn't happen. But the problem is when running backs tend to get stuffed in the hole, you often see the tackles or a guard, a lineman of some kind of pulling or pushing their running back forward in order to get momentum to potentially get a first down or get that extra yard. So I think this is going to be a very challenging thing for the NFL to actually ban as far as the tush push goes. And again, I just found it ironic that Packers of all the teams are the ones that are complaining about this. My understanding is the Atlanta Falcons have only sent defensive personnel to the combine. So if you Falcons fans are out there and you're hoping that they get some more offensive pieces, this might not be the draft that they're looking at. It looks like they're really trying to actually build their defense, which has really been holding that team back over the last few years. So what I'd like to go over next, I'm going to share my screen. And you're going to see here that this is going to be a document that basically is going to be going over a number of things that I like to look at from some of the players. So first off, we've got the running backs. With the running backs, you can see here, I've got it from kind of top to bottom as far as the player, what college team that they played for, age of the player, height, weight, BMI. BMI is a good factor to show a decrease in injury risk. Dominator rating brought to you by Player Profiler. Just basically shows you how dominant they were in college on the team that they were playing for. Breakout age, if they have a breakout age, that'll be here on the right. You can see here in my running backs, at least, that I don't have the breakout age quite filled in yet. Speed score is a very important aspect of the running back game. So I'll be looking for in the combine, checking out how their weight to their 40 time ratio is. And if they're a bigger back with a fast run, then their speed score is going to be relatively high. So generally, the speed scores have shown over the years to be a very effective way to rule in or rule out running back. Agility score, that's going to basically look at how well does this running back have as far as lateral quickness, or how shifty are they? Best reception total a year, you'll notice that I put 30 plus. And then you'll notice here also that in the running backs, I'll put how many that they had in their best year, along with what year was it that they reached that best. Again, if they reach that 30 threshold, they're going to be in green. If they're between 20 and 29 receptions in a given year, then they're going to be more of that yellow mark, so about that average pace. And if they're less than 20, then I ding them and I put them down at that red marker. Okay. Yards per carry, I've listed it, but it hasn't been a very good stat to follow for running backs to show like production. So I have it there as just another indicator. If I'm between one or two players, that might just give me that little bit of edge. Or potentially when I decide to make my own model, then I may or may not use yards per carry in the model. Again, at this point in time, it just doesn't sound like it's a very effective way to rule in or rule out a running back. So I just have that as kind of a neutral color. Draft capital is key. If you have high draft capital in that first round, especially, they're going to be played early and often. So we should definitely give them a higher grade if they are drafted early on. So I do have some of the players listed here that have some of the potential draft capital. Obviously, if they're in the first two rounds, they should probably be in green. If they're in that third, fourth, maybe even fifth range, you can kind of go in yellow because now teams are starting to draft the running back a little bit later. It'll be really interesting this year in 2025. There's so many running backs available that do these NFL teams decide just to wait a little bit longer because there's not really a lot of difference, once you get to another tier. Draft capital again, I've got the projected, and then once the actual draft happens, then I'll put the actual draft capital off to the side. Again, I can color code it just to make it a little bit easier to break down some of the running backs. I started to write in a little bit of PFF grades. I haven't got too far into it. I think running back is the only one I've got to. I think it was like the top 10. Lance Zierlein, he grades film. I am not a specialist when it comes to grading any type of film. So I wanted to have a numerical value to these athletes. Basically see like how well are they on the screen. I know Colton, he loves looking at film. It'll be interesting to see like how his video analysis compares to Lance Zierlein's. And then also just to the right here, you can see the next gen stats. The next gen stats, they're kind of broken down, to that elite tier with Ashton Gentry at 95. Again, that correlates with Lance Zierlein's grade of a 7.15, which again is in that elite tier. But then once you start going down here, you can kind of look at 70 and above in the next gen stats is considered good. Yellow is going to be average, and then red, of course, is not going to be very good at all. It's going to be below average. With Lance Zierlein's scores, I found it to be a little bit challenging to understand like how he values his scores. And I was wondering, what could be a perfect score. So with Lance Zierlein, just real quick, his scores are based on an 8.0 would be somebody that's going to be picked like one overall in the NFL draft, the perfect prospect. So if somebody was absolutely perfect, they'd be at 8.0. From 7.5 down to 7.3, they're a top 3 pick. They're perennial all-pro talent. 7.0 to 7.1. They're a top 10 prospect, Pro Bowl talent, and a day one starter. And then as we go down the line, 6.8 to 6.7, they're a first round talent, and they have a year one quality starter. 6.5 score would mean that they were drafted in the top 2 rounds in the NFL draft, and they're a boom bust player. 6.3 to 6.4, they're drafted in the second round, and they will become a future starter. 6.1 to 6.2, they're a third, fourth round talent, and they have a potential to be a starter, a good backup. At 6.0, they're looking at a fourth round talent. They have raw traits, and they're just kind of a traits-based prospect. 5.8 to 5.9, you're looking at fifth to sixth round backup specialist. And anything below that, they're basically considered maybe undrafted, back end of the roster, maybe just a camp body. And so, again, a very, very specific way of grading the talent with Lance Zierlein. And so having Lance Zierlein's grades, having PFF's grades eventually on here, and then also having some of the next gen stats grading on here will further just kind of help me have a better understanding of how I should be, who I should be drafting first, how I should be ranking these athletes, and basically just another way to just kind of compare what I'm thinking compared to some of the professionals that are out there. Some things to think about here. We've got Ashton Gentry here. You can see him. I have him at the number 1 running back spot, as anyone would. And what's really interesting is if we kind of slide all the way over here to Lance Zierlein's grade, again, 7.15 in that elite tier. What's interesting is that Zierlein has only graded 5 backs at 7.0 or higher since 2014, and Gentry is listed as the number 3 running back, only behind Barkley and Elliott, and ahead of Fournette and Dalvin Cook. So this should give you, again, he should be the consensus 101 in most rookie drafts. I really don't see any realm where he wouldn't be that 101 spot in any of the leagues, even in the super flex leagues that we play in. I think Gentry is going to be an easy shoe-in. But I do think that if I had the 101, I would consider still having the ability to just trade back a few spots. You'll notice these are very, very just raw right now. Okay. I was trying to break them up into some tiers. I had Gentry, Hampton, Henderson, Caleb Johnson, and Judkins basically in a tier of their own. So those first 5 running backs, I would be happy with any one of them, of those 5. And again, if I had the 101, I'd be looking to just see if I can accumulate more value. Having a running back at the 101, just it's too fragile in Dynasty. And the running backs just don't seem to maintain some of their value as like a wide receiver or a quarterback. And I certainly wouldn't want to be drafting a tight end like some of you were drafting Kyle Pitts a few years back at the 101, and we've seen that just kind of blow up in our face. So Ashton Gentry, again, I feel like he's an easy consensus 101. Some of the players that I'll be looking at are going to be like Trevor Etienne, RJ Harvey out of UCF. Devin Neal has been picking up some steam. I've seen him being mocked to Arizona, which I find is really interesting. We can just take a peek here with Devin Neal. He was from Kansas. He's 5'11", 210 pounds. I have age on there too. Again, running backs probably don't want to have a running back that's overly aged, at least in Dynasty, or at least you don't want to be drafting someone that early. But we saw somebody like Tracy, come forth and be very productive in Dynasty. So age is just a number when it comes to running backs. They can certainly be productive at any time. But you'll notice if we go back to Devin Neal, the BMI is at that 30 mark. Anything above 28 will decrease the risk for injury. His dominator rating is in the 85th percentile. And then if we slide over a little bit more, You can see best receptions was at 25 reception total in 2023. He did have a 5.8 yards per carry. And then again, he's going to be drafted somewhere around that late day 2, early day 3. And hopefully, he'll get the draft capital of that 3rd round potentially, which would help boost his stock. If we slide down a little further, again, this is how I'm going to be using some of this data. We're going to be getting his 40 time. We'll see the speed score. We'll see the agility score come the NFL Combine here just this coming Saturday. And then again, how does he grade out with the next gen stats, and how does he grade out with Lance Zierlein's stats? Some other players I'll be really interested in going into this NFL Combine are R.J. Harvey, Devin Neal we just talked about, and then also DJ Giddens. I do really like Woody Marks and Dylan Sampson as a couple other players to be watching out for. I think that LaQuint Allen from Syracuse could show a lot of burst and a lot of a very fast speed score. So he'll be somebody that'll be potentially moving up. And then also Brashal Tutton from Virginia Tech. I don't know if I said his name wrong, so excuse me if I said it incorrectly, but Tutton, he is somebody that completely dominated in college, and he showed a lot of speed on tape. He'll be somebody I'll be really interested to see. Could he be one of the potential fastest running backs in this class? And if we scoot along here, we can go down to the wide receiver position. Now with wide receiver, you'll notice I have Travis Hunter in red at the top. Travis Hunter has stated that he's going to be going to the Combine as a cornerback and not as a wide receiver. Now, cornerbacks are going to be participating on Thursday, and we'll see if he ends up doing a few drills come this Saturday. So I will be looking for Travis Hunter to see, does he participate in any of the wide receiver drills? Does he participate in any of the positional drills for the wide receiver? And then, is he gonna actually, run the 40? Is he going to do some of the catching drills? Will he do the gauntlet? I'm not sure. I think it'd be really interesting to watch. I love watching the ability of these prospects. It's like mixing my two favorite sports, track and field and football. And so if we basically nix Travis Hunter, and again, if we slide all the way over, I've got that Lance Zierlein score and then also some of the next gen stats. He was closer to that elite tier as well. The only elite wide receiver that would have been in this class per the next gen stats. But what's important at the wide receiver position is a little bit more challenging. It used to be that you wanted your wide receiver to be tall and heavy and have the ability to move, have a good dominator rating. And you also wanted him to be an early declare. Well, now since COVID, we're starting to see these wide receivers stay in college just a little bit longer. Some of these players like Xavier Legette last year was a 5th-year wide receiver, and he still was drafted at the end of the 1st round, which is still ridiculous. I'll digress there with the Panthers making another bad pick. But in my opinion, I think it's still important that if these wide receivers are coming out early, that means that somebody's telling them that the NFL values the way that they play and that they're going to be drafted. And so I put in green here on the Excel that early declare mark. I have it on an X, and these are the early declares that I've at least figured out or found out that they are coming into the NFL a little bit earlier than what they could have been, with still having some college eligibility. Dominator rating again from that player profiler. If you haven't seen Player Profiler, you definitely are missing out. Playerprofiler.com. You can look at each of these players on there. They're going to have age, height, weight. They're going to have the Dominator. They're going to have some of the college share and some of the breakout age. So I ended up writing some of them down. Again, I have it listed as far as like if it's in the green, it's going to be somebody that is at that 35 plus percentile for the Dominator. If they're between 20 to 35%, they're going to be more to yellow, probably more of like a wide receiver 2. And if they're less than 20, then there's a red flag. For college target share, you'll notice here how I listed it out. If they had a greater than 25% college target share, I had it in green. If it's between 15 to 25% college target share, then I have it in the yellow color. And if it's less than 15% college target share, I put it as a red. As we slide over a little bit more, I have breakout age. Again, a breakout age of greater than 75% I have in green. And then in yellow, I have between 45 and 75%. I just put it in the yellow mark. Anything less than that, of course, is probably going to be more in the red, or it's not listed. That's going to be more based on, I was just trying to find a way to make it a little bit easier to view in regards to the breakout age. College target share and the dominator rating, that's going to be having a little bit more data-driven analysis behind it. As I slide over here, college yards per reception, I think that'll be an interesting one to label out. Speed score, I put in yellow. It's not like the athleticism in wide receivers really hasn't shown to be providing any more fantasy points than somebody that has a lower score. So I just kind of put it in yellow. I personally like to have my wide receivers to be a little bit athletic, and I certainly want them to have the ability to have a good catch radius. So catch radius you'll see here is in green. Agility score I don't have highlighted. It's just going to be a stat that I want to see about tracking this year and see kind of what happens. The projected draft capital, I haven't changed the color on that quite yet. But again, if you can imagine higher draft capital at the wide receiver position, I would imagine that it would show earlier opportunity to basically produce. So if they're drafted within those first 3 rounds at the wide receiver position, of course, the first round being the most valued, I would think that would correlate with a better dynasty asset. As we come over, again, you'll notice I don't have the PFF grades quite yet, but I do have Lance's Airlines and the Next Gen Stats. And if we slide all the way back to the names, yes, there's a lot of details here in the wide receiver part. And you'll notice that initially in my top tier, I had Travis Hunter up there, but again, I have him in red. So we've got Emeka Buka, Luther Burden, Ted McMillan, Trey Harris, and Alik Ayaminer. And if we slide down a little bit more, again, then you'll kind of see the names that are kind of more into second tier, third tier, and then kind of the bottom tier at the wide receiver position. Overall, this wide receiver class it's fine. It's fine. But it's not going to be as good as what our wide receiver class was in last year's draft in 2024. Running back class has a lot more options, and it's going to be a lot deeper. So, I mean, there could be up to like 20 draftable running backs in this year's class, which is unbelievable. Wide receiver is going to be a little bit more dried up by the time you get into the later part of the NFL draft. If we go into the tight end position, we're going to be looking at guys like Gunnar Helm, Gangston from Syracuse, Luke Lackey, and Terrence Ferguson. These are going to be some interesting guys, in my opinion, to learn a little bit more about. And so what I especially like in my tight ends is I want a tight end that's going to be on the field all the time. I want a tight end that can block and catch, because what we've seen in the past is guys like Gesicki, Pitts. These are guys that are good at catching the ball, but they're only on the field about 50% of the time. Well, if you're only on the field for 50% of the time, then the other 50%, guess what? You're not catching any balls and you're not making any points for your dynasty fantasy teams. So ideally, we'd like to have tight ends that not only have some height to them, and you'll notice in this class, most of these guys have a pretty good height to them, but you also want them to have a pretty good weight to them as well. So if they're in that like 230 or like under that 240 mark, they're probably going to be a move tight end. And that's where a little bit of my concern is for Harold Fannin Jr. And some of my concerns are for Mr. Loveland. I mean, we saw even Dalton Kincaid not produce to the level that people were expecting. Well, guess what? He's Trey Burton 2.0. And so move tight ends, they just aren't going to get the opportunities as some of these other tight ends. And unless they go to a team that doesn't have a lot of pass catching weapons, then you'll see that the move tight end becomes a little bit more valuable. And maybe that's why we started to see Gesicki start to play a little bit better here when he was with the Bengals when Higgins was injured. But in the tight ends, outside of the height and weight, you'll notice I have breakout age on here as well, but it's not as much of a sticky stat because tight ends take a little bit longer to kind of cook. And then you've got the college dominator rating, college yards per reception. Again, I don't think it's a sticky stat quite yet for the tight ends, but I still want to try and track it. And again, if I'm kind of in between a couple of players, can I have some of these other stats and kind of mix and match them and compare them to maybe make a better choice in my dynasty drafts? Speed score, agility score. I want an athletic tight end. I don't want somebody that's just going to be plotting around out there not doing anything. I want a tight end that can show some good burst, get open, and make things happen. Can they get that yak, that yards after their catch? I imagine catch radius should also be something that we should have very valued with the tight end position. I don't have that highlighted yet, but I suspect that that'll be just something else that I'll have a little more interest in. Draft capital has not really shown to be as sticky also for the tight ends, mainly because there's been a number of tight ends that have been drafted in the first round of the NFL draft outside of Brock Bowers that have busted. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that you had O.J. Howard that everyone was interested in. Even Hawkinson really hasn't played to his full effect that you would have liked. And so draft capital, of course, ideally, we would like our guys to draft it early. But let's face it, we want the athletic tight end that can dominate the game, that's big enough to actually stay on the field. Again, if I slide all the way over, I do not have the PFF grades up yet. I do have Lance Zierlein's scores up here, and I do also have the next gen stats, just something more that I can compare my players to. And so if I finally hit this last button here, we will see the quarterback position. This year's quarterbacks, again, they're not being shown to be elite. Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders have been the consensus 1 and 2. If we slide all the way over here, you can see that Lance Zierlein had them as future starters with their score being 6.3 and 6.39, with Cam Ward being the 6.39, the highest graded in the class. And then behind them, then there's about 6 other quarterbacks that are in that potential starter, good backup role. You've got one that's in the backup specialist role, and then the rest are not so good, probably not going to get drafted. If we're looking at the quarterback position here, again, we've got quarterbacks, college team, their age. We're starting to see players come out a little bit later. We're seeing quarterbacks that might be more valued because they've had more games played. On the far side here, we've noticed that many of the quarterbacks that have busted in the league, such as like Trey Lance, they didn't get a lot of play in college. And, they're not. I think the NFL is starting to figure out if they play more in college, maybe they're going to be more developed when they come out to the NFL, and they'll be a lot quicker to start and start winning some games for their teams earlier on. And not only that, but they'll be more affordable. So if you draft somebody in the first round, well, you're paying them for 4 years, potentially 5 years at that rookie contract. And if they can compete right away, well, there's 5 years that you have them on a discount, versus if it takes them another 3 to 4 years after they're drafted because they didn't have the experience prior to coming into the NFL. Well, now you lost at least half of their rookie deal just trying to develop them. So look for these NFL teams to value college games played as a stat going forward with the development. With our quarterbacks, I got their names, college team, age, height, and weight. Height, again, a stat, you're probably looking at somebody that is greater than about that 6'2" range. You want a quarterback that has a little weight to them. So again, if they have a higher BMI over that 28 mark, then they're less likely to be injured. You'll notice I have hand size on here. Let's see who has some of the smallest hands in this class that have currently been measured. Jalen Milroe of Alabama has an 8-inch hand size, and so does Seth Hennigan of Memphis. Now, why does hand size matter? Well, the larger the hand that you have, the easier it is to control the football when you're throwing it. So, we all remember Kenny Pickett. There's a game with the little tiny hands that come up that you can kind of do funny things with. Everyone was making fun of Kenny Pickett with the small hands. Well, I hate to say this, but Jalen Milroe and also Seth Hennigan have a very comparable hand size, that of Kenny Pickett. And so I put that in red. If you have a hand size of greater than that 9-inch, then I'm going to have a lot less questions in regards to their ability to throw the pass. One of the problems that Milroe had during the Senior Bowl is that he would have the ball and then he would try and throw the ball and then it would hit the dirt because it just didn't seem like he had the control with it. Now, he has immense upside with running the ball. So that's why I still have him up there in that top tier. So the quarterbacks, again, I probably need to divide this up a little bit more. But I would have broke it as my top 5 quarterbacks is that Ward, Sanders, Dart, Milroe. You know what? I really like Dillon Gabriel. Yes, he has the age of 24.1. Yes, he's only 5'11". Hand size is decent, a little bit smaller weight. College QBR is here at that 59th percentile. College yards per attempts at 8.6, which is 71 percentile. And then his breakout age was 18.7, which you'll notice is one of the top breakout ages of this entire class. The only person that broke out a little earlier than him was Seth Hennigan. So I don't know. I think Dillon Gabriel, he reminds me a lot of Baker Mayfield. And hopefully, as he has his measurables come up, I'm hoping that he shows that he's athletic, that he has the ability to move when he needs to move. And you'll notice I've got 40-yard dash, I got burst, agility, arm velocity. It really hasn't shown that arm velocity is a sticky stat when it comes to the quarterbacks. It's a fun stat, but we don't often see that the arm velocity matches the actual quarterback play. So they might have a cannon for the arm, and I've seen many quarterbacks get drafted because they got the cannon for the arm, but they just don't know how to use it. So sometimes it's between the ears that really matters, and they haven't found a way to really measure that quite yet. They've tried to do it with different tests and things, and we saw Bryce Young do really well on that test, and then we saw a quarterback like Stroud do poorly. And, well, which quarterback would you rather have? Stroud. Pretty easy. College games, we've already talked about that. Draft capital. Yes, hello. If they're drafted in the first round, if they're drafted within that first 15 picks, they have a higher likelihood of being a better quarterback. If they're drafted between that 15 to 31 mark, or 15 to maybe 25, you're kind of getting closer to that Kenny Pickett range. However, remember at the end of the first round, that's where Lamar Jackson was stolen by the Ravens just 5-6 years ago. And so I just think that teams have become smarter with drafting the quarterbacks. There's a lot of there's a lot of quarterback needy teams that are out there. So look for some of these quarterbacks to come off the board maybe a little sooner than you expected. I keep hearing rumors about Jackson Dart getting drafted in the top 15. I suspect that Jalen Milroe will be drafted maybe in the early second. And then if you start going down the list, a guy that I think would be really interesting is I keep hearing that Vegas wants to get a quarterback that is has been in the league for a while, someone that's been more experienced. But would it surprise anybody if Will Howard is drafted at a former, well, he was an Ohio State quarterback this year? And I think that would match with the Chip Kelly narrative. Chip Kelly's now with the Vegas Raiders. Will Howard could be a quarterback that they can develop behind whatever experienced quarterback that they're going to bring in the offseason. And just next month, we're going to start figuring out in the free agency period, like, where some of this movement's going to come. You know, does the Raiders go into this draft knowing that they have a quarterback that's experienced already? And then again, Will Howard just makes a lot of sense for the Raiders. So you'll notice if we slide over, we'll just touch on Will Howard here a little bit. Will Howard, he's right under that Dylan Gabriel aspect. So right now I got him at like number 6, I think. Ohio State, 23 years old, 6'5", so he's got a good build to him, 242 pounds. He had a pretty elite QBR at 87.6. And then you have his college yards per attempt was in the 87th percentile, and his breakout age was 19, which is the 92 percentile. So a lot of games played, 42 games in his college career. He's projected to be drafted in the 4th, 6th round. I can see the Raiders draft him in the 3rd round, just to guarantee that they have Chip Kelly's guy. In the 3rd round, there's not a lot of risk. There's a lot of players that get drafted in the 3rd round that don't even make the team. So why not draft somebody that your team could use, such as like a Will Howard? They don't have any quarterbacks of consequence on the team right now. So again, in my opinion, Will Howard would be a great fit for the Vegas Raiders. If we slide over a little bit more, Next Gen Stats has them under a quality performer at 75, and listed under Lance Zierlein as a 6. So if we look down here, what's a 6 mean? We'll probably draft it in the 4th round, raw traits-based prospect. But in my opinion, I think he should probably be closer to a future starter, because I definitely see Will Howard as a Vegas Raider. So that was just me basically kind of touching on a little bit more of some of the guys that I'm really interested in seeing here come the NFL Combine. I'm going to be going there this Friday and this Saturday, so that way I can see the tight ends, quarterbacks, wide receivers, and running backs. Hoping that I can have some shorts and some other details and pods going forward that has some of the Combine information in there. So be on the lookout on YouTube for me. With that, don't forget to follow us at FF Healers on YouTube. Please press the like and subscribe button. Don't forget to also follow us at FF Healers and at FF Captain 22 on Twitter X. This is going to be a little bit more interesting if you're watching it on YouTube. So if you haven't found us on YouTube yet, please do so. That way you can have a better view of basically everything that I just touched on. With that, I hope everybody has a wonderful week. Look forward to the Combine. And this is the Fantasy Footballer Healers, and we are out.